For the audience, we do have a Spanish language interpreter available. If you are a Spanish speaker and would prefer to have interpretation during our meeting, you can do that. And if the interpreter can give instructions, maybe introduce yourself and give instructions on how that works, that would be helpful.
So we have 2 interpreters on right now, and you should be prompted to select the language you prefer, English or Spanish, once you enter the Zoom. Kind of doesn't give you another option.
Okay,
So-
when you enter the meeting, you will be
Mhm.
prompted. Thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't know how it works.
Yep.
So we learn something every day. So welcome everyone, including in person and remote audience. And as we get going, just a reminder that if you are interested in addressing the board during our public forum portion of the meeting, you can sign up through your chat function in Zoom. And our host will be muting you if you accidentally unmute so that we can keep the sound distractions to a minimum. Don't be afraid. All right, so moving on the agenda, introductions and announcements, public forum. Visitor guest book, would you like to keep track of who's in the room? So go ahead and sign in if you're here. And any announcements? No one has announcements. So presentations, district annual financial report. So we have our auditor in the audience.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, thank you for allowing us to be here tonight to present to you the
Can you hold on a
information.
second? It's not very loud. We're gonna try to adjust the volume. Sorry and thank you. It wasn't. Just making sure.
Is that better? Is that better?
Thank you for keeping on talking. We're still working on it a little bit.
Okay.
Sound just like all on my computer.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Volume?
Julie, you might be able to go down to the bottom right,
Do you think it's on there?
and if you're one in charge of it, you might be able to. Yeah.
What do I do here?
Thank you for your patience with our technological.
No problem.
room. We're getting through it.
Yeah, one of the speakers.
Hey, you want to give it a try again?
How does this work?
Yes. Yay, thank you. Good job, Jill. Okay.
Thanks, Cameron. Cameron to the rescue.
Good report.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me here tonight. I appreciate the opportunity. I always like the chance to meet with governing bodies of our municipalities that we audit and share a little bit of information regarding the audit. Just so you know who I am, I'm Brad Bingenheimer, partner with the firm of Bolt Carlisle and Smith, that is a division of Singer Lee Wack. And once again, we had the pleasure of serving as the auditors for the school district for the year ended June 30, 2021. I just want to take a few minutes and share a little bit of information about the audit, and then give you a chance to ask me any questions if you'd like to. So the first thing I'd say is that we have issued our opinion on the financial statements. And it's what we would classify as an unmodified report, which in a nutshell basically says that in our opinion, the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position and results of operations of the district for the year ended June 30, 2021. I would point out that it is a report on the modified cash basis of reporting. So it is not under generally accepted accounting principles, but it is an acceptable basis of accounting for financial reporting for Oregon purposes. So that's our opinion on the financial statements. In conducting our audit, we actually had to apply 4 different sets of auditing standards, and some of these are new to the district for this last year due to the amount of federal money that the district received and expended for the year. So essentially, we had to apply 4 different sets of auditing standards in conducting our engagement. The first one, of course, would be the generally accepted auditing principles that apply to all audits of both businesses and governments in America. So these are the standards we would apply in every single audit. In addition to that, as an Oregon municipality, we have to apply the standards of the minimum standards for audits of municipal corporations in Oregon. So that's one that we've always applied to also. But then in addition, this year, because that federal money, we had to apply 2 different new sets of standards that we hadn't had to apply in the past. The first one is government auditing standards, which is issued by the Comptroller of the U.S. And these are additional standards that we have to apply that talk about our responsibilities regarding compliance with laws and regulations and internal controls. And then the 4th set of standards we had to apply was for those under the uniform guidance, which required us to drill down on specific federally funded programs and do additional audit procedures on those specific programs. And each of these standards has its own report, as we'll go through the document that we can talk about. So I already talked about the first one under generally accepted auditing standards. That's our auditor's report that we said was unmodified. So we'll cover the other 3 in a little bit here. But to give you some financial highlights of where the district ended the year. So you ended the year with $1.9 million in total assets. You had total liabilities of $569,000. So that left the district with a net position of $1.4 million. And that was a decrease from the prior year of $691,000. Of course, given everything, revenues changing this year and additional expenditures, that's not a huge surprise. And your total revenues were just over $11 million. So you did have a small decrease in your net position, but it's kind of understandable given everything that was going on. Of course, look at some of the important funds of the district. So I'm actually on slide number 5 now. If somebody's advancing that. Okay. So the general fund this year ended the year with a fund balance of $461,000. And that was, once again, a decrease of $180,000. The energy fund, which is kind of expecting to use up most of the resources, it ended the year with a fund balance of $55,000, which was a decrease of $675,000. Going on to the next slide, kind of gives you some historical view. Boy, the one that got to you isn't very clear. The across the bottom is supposed to be the years, with 2021 being on the left-hand side and 2017 on the right-hand side. I'm not sure what happened there in that chart. But essentially, you can kind of see where your net position has been over the last 5 years. So the current net position is the lowest you've ever had in the last 5 years in terms of both what's restricted and unrestricted funds. But as I said, a lot of that had to do with that energy, which was for a specific purpose. And as you use those, it would be expected that those would go down. So, just kind of some very high level, items in your financial statements. Then on the next slide, we talk about our report under those minimum standards for audits of municipal corporations. So those standards require us to look at your compliance with specific Oregon laws and regulations. Several of those that we did find some non-compliance with, all related to budgetary compliance. So there were three categories of expenditures where the expenditures exceeded the appropriations. There was a supplemental budget that was passed during the year. However, it didn't appropriately appropriate the unanticipated funds by the specific functions. So whenever you have supplemental budgets, there's certain language you have to have in the resolution. And it just didn't have that specific language that we'd look for. And then the budget transfers did not agree. The transfers in and out did not agree in the most recently adopted budget. We've talked about these with your county staff there, and we can help them work through these things throughout the year as they come up. So beyond just the compliance with Oregon laws and regulations, one of the things we talk about in here very briefly is internal controls. So as part of every audit, we come in and we obtain an understanding of the internal controls of your organization. And we do that for a couple reasons. The primary one is, as auditors, we're looking for those areas where there are weaker internal controls. Maybe you don't have enough people to do everything you'd like. We're looking for those areas where weaker internal controls, because for auditors, that means there's a potential higher risk there. So we will kind of zero in on those higher risk areas throughout the audit. And then also, kind of as a byproduct, the second purpose of that is, if there's something that we feel we need to discuss to you, we bring those forth in a separate document. So we do talk about some internal controls, and we can kind of talk about that a little bit. Also, on the next slide, relate to government auditing standards, because that also requires us to look at internal controls. And internal controls, we classify them in a couple different buckets. Either if it's a material weakness, this is something that really is something that needs to be corrected. A significant deficiency is something that, well, it's not so bad, but something that we really think you should look at, seeing what you could do. Now, the good news is, in looking at that, we didn't have anything that we're bringing forth to you as a significant deficiency or material weakness in your internal controls. So essentially, you're doing as much as you can with everything you have as far as your resources. So we didn't have any findings there under government auditing standards. And government auditing standards also requires us to take a further look at your compliance with laws and regulations, kind of on a broader scale than just those related to Oregon, to see if anything comes across our attention that would indicate there's some other non-compliance. And once again, we can report we did not identify any of those in conducting our audit. And then the last report that we issue relates to the report on the uniform guidance. So this last year, the district had expenditures of federal awards of just over $1 million. So these requirements come into play whenever you have expenditures in a year of more than $750,000 of federal awards. So this last year, you had total expenditures of just over $1 million. So that required us to select a program to test. And the largest program you operate is the child nutrition program. It had total expenditures of just under $483,000. So what we have to do is look at that in terms of two things. One, once again, these federal programs have compliance requirements. They have rules you have to follow. So we're looking at in terms of, do you have internal controls over those rules? And once again, we could say we didn't have any findings there. And then the next question is, well, not only do you have to have controls over the rules, but did you follow all the applicable requirements? So we do have a finding here, and it really relates to the fact that initially, when we were engaged, signed the engagement letter for the audit for the year ended June 30, 2021, the district was not aware that they were going to be subject to this compliance requirement, these requirements under the uniform guidance that we have to do. And so essentially, though, that is on the district's plate to know that under the federal regulations. So basically, we're saying, you weren't aware that you needed this additional audit service. We had to basically inform you. That's going to be an indication that, it's kind of hard to comply with something unless you're aware you need to comply with it. And the awareness really does, according to the federal laws, fall to the district. Of course, we've had discussions with management about this. So they understand going forward. Every year we have to look at how much federal awards were expended and properly engage us to do the proper audit. So kind of one of those things that, yes, it happened, but we fixed it and we're all going to go forward from there. So that's kind of the highlights of our audit in a nutshell. And I guess I'd ask if anybody has any questions for me.
Do board members have questions for Brad? All right, thank you very much, and well done, finance.
Well, thank you for having us again. It is always a pleasure to work with your staff. They are always very helpful to us. As auditors, we come in and we are a complete disruption to their normal workflow because we're there asking a million annoying questions and digging into all kinds of things. But they're always very patient with us, provide us everything we want, answer all those million questions. So I want to thank your district staff for helping us to do our job too.
Thank you very much.
Sherry, can we pause another step? I don't think I have the right speaker. Zoom can hear well when someone on Zoom is talking, but they can't because this wasn't.
Oh, okay.
Because the sound's coming from that. So
All right, we're going to take another
quick break.
technology pause.
Well, thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
I can send you guys those slides. I didn't realize he was wanting us to share them. So I have all the slides. I can forward them to you guys if you're interested.
Okay, let someone on Zoom tell us if they can hear us.
Stephanie, can you unmute and talk at us and tell us if you can hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Move ahead into the agenda. So district and actually the wellness grant. Cameron.
Yes, so yeah, pulling up another successful year for the wellness grants going on. We just finished our second year, and so we turned in some paperwork to OEA Trust. And that was just going over everything that we did last year.
Cameron, can you pause a second?
Go.
What do you think?
Oh, that's.
Just so people in the remote world can hear you. Thank you.
And like you're close to that, so you're good. No, you're
Oh, good.
Yes,
All right.
thank you.
Yeah, so we just had to submit paperwork and also reapply for our third year. So in the packets 4 through 30, you can see that just going from the top down, some of our action steps for the next year, some of the goals that we'd like to attain as a staff, just because we recognize it's been a crazy year. So we did a survey to address what would staff like to do for wellness, physically, mentally, just socially. So we gathered a few new ideas as well as carrying over some old ones. One of our popular ones this year was cooking with Gabby. She's in Silverton. We actually have one more dessert planned in the beginning of December that we're trying to figure out. So that should be exciting. Healthy dessert, of course. But yes, we just went over our end of year. How did things go? We weren't able to accomplish everything. We're trying to do a blood pressure program here with everyone. we got shut down from the trust because they wanted nurses to do it. Nurses said no, not during the COVID times. So it's something that we can circle back to later. But yeah, overall, just continuing trying to build a wellness program, make it sustainable. Just awesome help through the district champions with Christy and Erica with bringing up this report and just jumping through all the hoops that are required to just get the grant. And so we're looking forward to hearing back from them in about a week or two, once they go through our end of year program or paperwork to see that everything was met, and then starting off again in the new year, since it's based off the January through December calendar, not a school year. Any questions?
I would just like to jump in and acknowledge all of Cameron's incredibly hard work. We applied for this grant. He had kind of alluded to that. The timing of this grant is very awkward. We apply in November, it gets acknowledged in January, and then we don't really get funding until like March. So it's a business manager's nightmare. And Christy like jumped in, go get it. So we really didn't get our first award until March of 2020. So think about the timing of that as like a new person taking on this leadership responsibility to start implementing a district-wide staff wellness. And 12 days later, we get shut down. And so, Cameron's just really embraced this, along with Christy Seiler and Angie Traeger and Stacey Kleinschmidt at the different, building levels. Cameron did all of this work himself, you guys. He did the final year 2 wrap up. He did this entire resubmission. He meets with me regularly, but then he goes and does it. So I just want to thank Cameron
And for the
publicly and
numbers.
for the board for everything. Christy's only been here 8 months now. I mean, half a school year, and she just jumped in and did everything. This grant is really not school friendly, and so we just have this really dynamic team. And so I just want to acknowledge the work that they've done on this to help our staff in this incredibly difficult time.
And I was gonna just acknowledge your SMART objectives were clear and make sense, and I was impressed with your report. So thank you.
And I had 2 things. One, I'm piggybacking on Sherry's need. Smart objectives, never heard of smart objectives, but I catch the concept, and I like what you did. I especially like that you have a very realistic target, I thought, of 35% of employees on the walkathon. The second thing was the cuff, the measuring of blood pressure. This is, they won't fund that? Is that what that is?
It wasn't that they wouldn't fund it. It was just difficult with all the safety precautions that were ever changing. So
Yeah,
it was.
what I'm trying to say is, a nurse does it, a schmuckatelli does it. When schmuckatelli does it, you still get a reading. So we didn't get the professional reading. You know what? When you go to the doc, when I go to the doctor, and I go in and the nurse reads me, and she says, you're this. And the doctor comes in and goes, oh, that's so much crap. And he puts on the cuff and he says, you're really this. And that's what I'm saying is, you don't have to have a nurse to do this.
Well, they had other requirements related to it. It wasn't just a reading. They needed us to be able to provide some education. So what if somebody came with a super high reading and they needed, what if it was in a medical emergency? Somebody would need to be able to respond.
To be able to refer at least.
Right. And so I'm not a trained medical professional.
Right.
So what if your diastolic was 100?
Huh?
Okay. What if?
Yep.
And so just,
And so if
Mr.
you were a
Schmuck wouldn't be
diastole
able
was
to do
100 and you didn't have this thing going on, nobody knows 100 and the guy's
And
walking around.
it's-
They go,
It's having the
"You're winning."
education and the capacity though to be able to do the right thing. And I do see both sides, but from the trust perspective, we needed to have the knowledge and the resources to be able to do it, which from their perspective was nursing, and the nurses were like, we're not gonna do that in the time
of
Yeah.
COVID.
And it's
So
something
perhaps
we can definitely circle back to. is-
Yeah, I really, this is not my fight. I am not chicken fight. I'm not.
Oh, no,
dog
it's,
fight. I just,
they're very understanding to work with and it's great.
Yeah, and John, what I heard Cameron say in his report that, yeah, they'll circle back to it and try to bring that
yeah, exactly.
back once.
And that's exactly
Yeah.
what great work is when,
Yeah.
no, when you didn't get a yes, but it's still a good idea and you're willing to, that's great work, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for board members? Right, thank you, Cameron. Well done. Moving on to agenda approval. There are no changes, so if someone wants to make a motion to approve the agenda, I would.
I make a motion to approve the November 8th, 2021 agenda.
Second,
All right, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
I,
And it passes. Thank you. Consent items. Does anyone have a need to call anything out to treat separately? Okay, I would accept a motion to approve the consent items as presented.
I move we approve the consent items as presented.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Unanimously. All right, moving on to reports. And I want to remind the audience that we're at agenda item 6. And there's 4 pieces to 6, and then public forum is after that. So if you do want to address the board during public forum, you can go ahead and sign up through the chat with Jill, our host. Okay, so administrator reports. Who wants to? I see
Okay,
Eric.
so the principals are gonna be the show. They're always more fun than I am. We are here to present our strategic plan update to you all. Dale is here, but he is on Zoom. Are you sharing the screen or are you sharing? Should we share?
Oh, yeah, I'm just up for reference.
So we are able to present strategic plan indicators to the best of our ability. And we'll go through each of them. There is one that we are not able to give data on, but the administrators will go through that for you all in detail. We also embedded the information that you guys, the questions, information on the question that you had around attendance and attendance rate versus regular attenders. Okay, so those are embedded throughout. So I just realized that when I turned to a PDF. You wanna- Well, we'll just start talking because you should have it in.
They have it in there.
Great, why don't you just, we'll just get going.
Absolutely. Actually, I can shout. I haven't take your voice. So performance indicator number 1 is regarding AVID, and that all staff will implement effective strategies and methodologies. We had 9 teachers who attended summer digital XP. Where am I? I don't want to end up in the center. There we go. Anyway, so we had 9 teachers who attended summer digital training. And then we had our administrative team attended Leading Change for Educational Equity this summer for AVID training as well. Some areas we're focusing in on this year in particular are K-12 alignment in the areas of organization. We found that was an area our students were really struggling in across the board after the pandemic. And then K-8 alignment of focused note-taking, just again, getting back into those academic behaviors and habits that are not as strong after a year of digital learning. So future plans for AVID, as we're beginning to work through some of our RTI work, we want to incorporate that and really start to measure the effectiveness of the strategies that we're using so that we know that we're choosing the highest effect strategies for our kiddos and the needs that they have at the time. So any questions about that?
How are you measuring performance indicator number 1?
So as it was written, it was that we will implement, right? It needs a rewrite. So that's really what we're looking at, is that next step, is how do we measure the effectiveness of the strategies? So that's where we're heading. Thanks, that's a good question.
You?
All right.
So since indicator number 2 was around attendance, I embedded a couple slides here, Jared and I, on your question around attendance rate. So you should have a slide that has like 2 side by side. The first one on the left there says attendance percentage. So that is looking at the total attendance percentage for students over a selected time span. And that's usually what I think people think about when they think about attendance. So you're looking at your total days present divided by the total days enrolled. For a school, that would be over for all the students, right? So it's really just that average. For us, for any school, you can look at a full school day, you can look at the morning, you can look at the afternoon. That's how attendance is taken. It's taken in full day or half day increments. For regular attenders, which is on the right side there, it compares regular attenders, which are students who have an attendance rate of at least 90%, with the chronically absent students, who are the students who have less than 90%. So we're comparing those 2 groups of students. So that would be the number of total students over the total number of students, right? So we're taking those who attend regularly over everybody else. So if you think about if you're missing 10% of school, that would put you in that chronically absent category. Okay. The next slide talks about why do we look at the regular attendance rate? Well, attendance can, when we look at the literature, is your number 1 predictor of school success. If we break down who is in that 10%, we can get down to the student level, so we know who's there. We can look at, we can design interventions. And then we looked at rates in grades 10, 9, and 10. They're an excellent indicator of who is going to graduate from high school.
Sure. So on that next slide, you guys see performance indicator number 2, and that red line up at the top is our 92% regular attendance, goal. What you end up seeing is where we are, or where we were at this time when it was built for St. Mary's, MAMS, and JFK. And this is pretty kind of standard of what we're seeing across the state and other districts as well. Giving you an idea of even just how that could be impacted or calculated. If a student missed 1 period at either the middle school or the high school, that would be below a 90% attendance rate for that day. And so it would get calculated, accordingly. So if you were to look at that overall attendance rate that you guys saw last time in comparison to the regular attendance rate, sometimes that's where you see that discrepancy. And so a couple of the things that we are doing is utilizing Oregon Data Suite to help monitor this attendance. I pull that up all the time and just look at the middle school in particular, and just maybe which kids that we need to check in with and support. Continuing to build those positive relationships with students and families. That is so important to making sure that if students are coming a little bit tardy, or if they've missed multiple days in a row, we can help families understand what supports we have in place and how we can best assist. Just making sure we're increasing those parent contacts, and that students who are at risk, we are identifying through an SST process in our schools and being able to serve them appropriately. Again, getting those supports in place. For students that we traditionally, this occurs few and far between, but for students we haven't heard from in a while, if we can't get a hold of them, home visits are sometimes necessary. And we generally do those in pairs, just to, again, check in on the student and making sure they know what we can offer within our schools, and the families are well aware as well. And then last but not least, you see nudge letters there. That is an opportunity to send a letter home to families, more as a way to kind of say, hey, here's your students' overall attendance rate right at this time. Here's how it kind of compares to middle school students overall. This is why it's important. The school is here to support. So it really is a very brief letter, but just letting families know that it's on our radar. We're available.
And does that go out in both Hispanic?
English and Spanish?
Yes.
Yes.
Good.
Yep.
And do we have enough Russian speakers to have that be a concern?
If we had that need, we would absolutely make that available as well.
Good.
A couple questions.
Yeah,
So these are our numbers for this year,
correct.
correct? So
As of last week.
is it taking into consideration our students that are in quarantine?
That's a great question. No, when they're listed as in quarantine within our system, that is not counting against them from an attendance perspective. If they are marked as ill though, that does count against it. So that's a great question.
And how do these numbers compare? You kind of look, compared, is this normally where we're at this time of the year, or
No,
is it a lot lower than normally?
no, not at all. If we were to look in a traditional year, you would see those closer to 90%. We would be hovering around where our goal is. And so if you look, last year is such not an accurate comparison.
Right.
So I'm gonna go back to the previous one. I think
Go
like
back
the
2 years.
elementary and middle, we're kind of hovering around 90%, and JFK somewhere in the
Is
80s.
that back when you were in school? Is that what you said?
Yeah, right, exactly, all the way back.
Sorry.
So we're including quarantine and exclusion or just quarantine?
Yes, you're saying quarantine and exclusion as far as how it's counted? Yes.
So those are not included.
They are,
It
they're
is.
included as attendance.
Correct.
They're included as attending.
Yes, correct.
Correct.
So it doesn't have to be answered now, but why are we so low this year compared to where we are in years past? Again, doesn't need to be answered now, but that's just kind of like a question I have, like, what's the factor that's making us lower than in years past?
And my question on that would be, are other schools having the same readouts that we're getting?
Yes, I actually just talked to somebody at the WESD last week when we were talking about this, and it is pretty consistent, even in bigger districts, that we're seeing around 60% regular attendance rate. And so when they were looking at some of our rates, they felt like it was comparable, if not better. I think we're having families be more cautious. If a student is not feeling well, they are keeping those students out. That could be part of it. And then also just transitioning from being, at home and distance learning to coming back, and just sometimes, some of the hurdles that might be involved with that. But being purposeful about reaching out to our families is going to be really important.
Other question I had was, you threw in tardy as a reference
Yeah.
when people aren't making it on time. How does tardy affect absenteeism?
It's not calculated in here, but we track it
Yes.
because we know the impact of students walking into class 10 minutes late, and just kind of what that means about the start of their day,
Exactly.
their access to breakfast and other basic needs that just help them be successful in school.
Disruption of the class, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
But so tardy does not it's an attention grabber for y'all, but it's not a tick mark on the page.
Correct.
When you're doing the 2 classes in a day would knock somebody past 90%, so they'd be in the tough category for that day. Is there such a thing as like a kid goes to the doctor, and when he's gone to the doctor, he really pretty much takes off for the day? Or when you go to a sporting event?
Sure.
Well, okay, now I think that's a pretty good one. When you go to a sporting event and you had to leave at 1 o'clock, does that make them school participants for the day, or are they out for?
You know, John, it's a good question. It is an excused absence for school-related events.
Yeah,
I don't know if my colleagues could,
Dale can probably answer that. Dale's on Zoom.
Dale
Because
is right.
we've had this question
about how
before.
that's calculated.
Actually, I can't answer that question, but thank you.
We
he's already under the bus.
So we have had this question before. It's been a couple of years, and Sherry, you might remember. I'm gonna put us both on the spot. It's an excused absence because it is school related, but it still counts as an absence because they're still missing instruction. And so the idea is
I want
that
to-
having kids in school, having them in class is important.
So it's
And-
counting against the regular attendance rate.
Yeah.
Well, and that was exactly the point.
That was my hunch as well.
Yeah.
But we'll double check on that too.
But so it doesn't count as far as when you get the unexcused excused, just like a doctor's note would be excused.
And all I was trying to do is fluff the pillow in the bed for keeping the numbers high. If we're losing 6 counts in a year or 6 counts in a sports season because of this, then how do I get those other 6?
Well, I know our athletic director is Kevin Moffett is very aware of that and the impact of missing instruction has on students.
Good.
So as he's scheduling games right now, and we're constantly in communication for both middle school and high school and how it's impacted. He's keeping that in mind and just making sure that we can have the least amount of class time missed.
Any other questions on the attendance? Hot button topic, all right.
I do have one, and it's mostly for the whole team. On the previous slide, it says the regular attendance rates in grades 9 and 10 are excellent indicators. Are we looking back to like elementary to look at absenteeism and how that affects an individual's attendance and success as they go through elementary, middle, and high school?
I would just say, looking at overall just research and literature, when you look at what's some of the best like key predictors of school success, looking at 3rd grade readings. And when you look at specific grades, when they talk about attendance, those are the ones that pop out in the literature. I'm not saying that those aren't predictors.
9th and 10th?
Yeah. So like when you go to Attendance Works, or when you go to the WSD has specific Everyday Matters, that's where we get a lot of our resources. That's those are the grades that they specifically call out. So like you're really going to want to target 9th and 10th graders, because if they don't start accumulating those, that's why 9th grade on track is an actual measure that the state tracks.
Sure.
Because if they are not on track, then the likelihood of them graduating.
But we're not looking at like elementary to.
I'm not saying that we're not looking at it. I'm just saying that those are the ones that they have researched and know that it is important. So they're looking at it and they have spreadsheets and they look at it, but those are the ones that are researched and that we know are vital.
And they're taking these interventions in all 3 buildings when they see people who are not, who are.
Yeah, but I'm not saying those others aren't important. Those are just the ones that are researched, and why that regular attendance, the 90% versus the overall, let's look at the average congregate. That's why they look at regular attenders.
Cameron and I will also be attending, I believe, this Wednesday, a community of practice, just to talk with other districts. What are they seeing? What are they doing? What's successful, and how can we better support our students here in Mount Angel? So
When it comes to the home visits, normally like the counselor would be doing that, since we don't have any counselors. Is that now going to be the like behavior specialist that's going out with a team member, or?
essentially, yeah, Andrea and I did it last year when we did that. I usually will either take Cameron or like Mr. Traeger sometimes, somebody that we can do it in pairs and that is knowledgeable about the student and family. So.
Any others? Thank you. Moving on to the next one. This is Dale.
Okey doke. Once again, I apologize for not being there. It's been one heck of a day at the Peterson household. I can just say that. I think I sent an email to Rachel today at about 1 o'clock that says, "Can today just end?" So that's kind of how the day went. So I also want to kind of go back to one of your questions with regards to attendance and ODE. An absence is an absence, whether it's excused or not excused, it's still an absence in regards to ODEs, how they manage that. So that might help you to understand it a little bit better. That's just how they look at it. So I hope that's a little bit easier. So go ahead.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Performance indicator 3 is all ninth graders earn 7 credits. Okay, so this is a indicator that the district has chose to use for on track for graduation. The state of Oregon uses 6 credits, so we were trying to be a little more ambitious when this was done, and that's okay. So the class of 2024, it's 43 students. Currently, there's 34 students that have earned 7 credits, which I'm gonna say, when you're thinking about this during a pandemic, that's pretty darn good. And the percentage of students that are on track to earn that 7 credits were 79%. Now, is that where we wanted to be? The goal for this year was 95%, so we're significantly away from that. But again, given the fact that we just went through a pandemic, and I have checked with my colleagues in other districts that are well below that 79% mark, I'm pretty excited about that. So what are we using for not the strategies for 2020, 2021, but 21-22? What we're looking at, some staff are allowing students additional opportunities to pass standards that were not passed during first semester. So in other words, if there was 5 standards, let's say in Algebra 1, and they passed 3 of them, but they didn't pass the other 2, their staff members are allowing those students to actually be retaught those standards and then reassess them to see if they can pass them. And once they do, then we change that grade from an F to whatever the grade is that they earn. We've also identified students that did not earn 7 credits and have enrolled them in Grad Alliance. So this is relatively new for us. Grad Alliance has been around for a while, just pretty much last year, late last year and this year. And it's a good way for students to earn credits. It's a credit deficiency program. So in other words, if you're behind in credits, you've had to fail the class to be able to take a Grad Alliance class. If you're looking at initial credit, meaning they've never taken the class before, Grad Alliance is not the way to go. And then we just had some students that enrolled in our online summer school, which was Grad Alliance this last summer, and it wasn't super successful. It was, I think we had a couple students that earned maybe 0.5 credits, which is 1 class. So again, it wasn't super successful then, given the fact that we're in a pandemic, right? So that's what we have for that.
Any questions for Ms. Peterson? Thank you. And moving on to indicator 4.
All right, so indicator 4 is that students entering kindergarten will have preschool experience. You may assume that there was some impact on this indicator over the past year. Only 23% of our students this year entering kindergarten have had preschool experience. The numbers have been in the 60 to 70% range. It's noticeable, I'll just say. You know, preschool really provides a lot for our kiddos and gives them that learning environment that's different than the home. And so this is a big priority for us moving forward and kind of realigning with some of our pre-K partners to be able to kind of get that chain of communication happening again between them. And yeah, we have some work to do in this area to make sure these are reestablished, but we now realize how much preschool really does help our kiddos. We knew that before, but now we see it daily. Any questions about that?
Thank you, Jasmine. Yeah. Performance indicator 7. Dale again. Dale.
Well, this is going to be relatively short because something happened in translation here. Because this is last time we did this was not updated. So I apologize for that. I remember doing this a week or so ago, and it's not the correct numbers. I will look in my notes, and I will actually forward the correct information on to all the board members either tomorrow or the next day. So I apologize that this is not correct.
All right. Thank you.
Well, I'll kind of partnered with Dale on indicator 8. Indicator 8 there is all students will participate in at least one school or community activity, club, or sport each year. And so right below that indicator, you saw a graph of, I went all the way back to 2019. And I think I alluded to this in the last board meeting. We had 185 students that year compared to 165 students this year. And so when you look at fall sports participation, we are right at an equitable level. And when you look at right now, who is 2019 winter sports to 2021, and we continue to get more and more students every day. I just had another one before I came here tonight. We are having an increased interest, including in just Battle of the Books, probably needing to expand to 2 teams, which just means 2 sets of books. And I love that our kids are getting involved and staying active. And so that's a little bit about the middle school, and I'll let Dale talk about the high school.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. I would say the fall is not a really big participation time for us, because I would say the spring is the big time for us in participation, because we've got track, which a lot of kids go out for track. We've also got softball and baseball happening. But this year, much to our surprise, we literally had a third of our students that were participating in a fall sport. So that was, football, volleyball, and cross country. Speaking of which, big shout out to our cross country team for doing super well this weekend in really tough conditions. So our girls did well, and we should all be proud of them.
Dale, we had soccer too in partnership.
And yes, thank you. So we also have soccer this year too, because we've got we're partnering up with, I believe it's Salem Academy. So we have a handful of kids that are out for boys soccer, and we've got I think it's a couple girls that are out for girls soccer. So we're hopeful to see that pick up next year. I would love to see us actually offering soccer, and I know Coach Moffitt is looking at that too. Not have this as a kind of a dual thing with another school, but actually us taking it on and moving along that route. But additionally, with the way our schedule is, clubs, we have not been able to participate in clubs yet, just because of the way our bell schedule is. So we're working on that to maybe actually have a different bell schedule for second semester, where we could actually have kids in clubs again. So that's more to come.
Thank you. Any questions for Jared or?
Jared, I think just one for Jared. Because I know that you have a leadership group, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be something that would?
It's because it's kind of embedded within our master schedule now. We did not count that as a club, but in years past, we probably did.
Yeah.
And Katie and I, a couple of years ago in 2019, used to send out surveys to see exactly what students were participating in the community. And so that might be, next time we report, that will give us a good opportunity to see what else is happening. Is, scouts happening? What other things are our kids doing? Maze, to be able to get a clear picture of how active they are. And
Because I know leadership is kind of like the only sort of that in your Battle of the Books, the club at the middle school level. And
right,
I know there's quite a few kids in the leadership group.
a lot.
It makes sense. And if they're meeting at the scheduled time, it makes sense to count them as, that extra activity.
When we used to have that as an after school, it conflicted with sports. And so students felt like they had to choose. And we really wanted to be purposeful about taking that away. And so it's actually, we have a leadership advisory class.
Yeah, that's
So,
awesome.
yeah.
Thank you.
I think something else to keep in mind, though, if you remember back in the fall, Moffitt said every soccer player that's playing doesn't play another sport. So that was a good thing to help our indicator 8 as well, adding soccer. All those soccer players don't play another sport for us at the high school level.
Well, I think getting back to the idea around the survey was, as long as they're connected with something, right? So if they're doing something with the church, if they're doing something with Maze, if they're doing something with us, we need to find out who's not connected.
Absolutely.
Who's not connected. because we know that if they are connected with something, they are more likely to be connected with school. A connection is what's going to help them be successful. And so that's the why behind the indicator. And so that was our intention and our purpose behind the indicator. And unfortunately, COVID has put a little hitch in our giddy up, right, John? So, so that's where we hope to get back to. We had brainstormed around, well, how do we help get our elementary school kids connected in something? And so we brainstormed ways that we could do stuff school-wide, help them feel connected as a school community. And so, you know, we're finally able to have those conversations again, because when you feel connected to your school community, to your broader community, you're more likely to be invested. And then your attendance increases, and then your achievement increases, or your growth, and you know, all of those things, right? And so that's the why behind that indicator. And so I just wanted to kind of bring us back to that. With that, I just need to have a really honest, I don't know, discussion, I guess, if you will, around indicator 9. But also we didn't have any updates for you around growth. Indicator 9 is around achievement. We did not, just being really honest, we did not administer MAP, which is measures growth. So we do not have, you may have noticed that was missing from our presentation. So we don't have growth data to give you for right now. We also don't have current or it wouldn't be valid, any growth, achievement data to give you right now, because students didn't take it 2 years ago and only certain grades took it, and in certain areas last spring with the way that it was kind of rolled out last year. And so to do any sort of reporting on that just wouldn't be really accurate to say how we are or aren't doing. And so I just, you know, we just need to be really honest about that as far as that goes. I believe most of you know that, but.
There were competing priorities to testing.
I mean, a little bit.
And that makes sense.
We were busy measuring square footage on floors.
Is there a plan in the future to go back to maps like this year at all, or next year?
Yeah, there is. And we want to make sure and get very clear with our teaching staff the why of what they will do with that information. And because that needs to be strengthened still, we want to make sure that it's used for daily instruction. So that we're providing a lot of clarity and guidance around that this year. We'll be back on board next fall.
The most accurate data we had too was last year we did test in the spring, and we generally showed you guys spring to spring data. And so that was the first time our students were kind of back in person, and we felt really confident about how that is administered. And so hopefully more to come.
On that one, any other questions or comments? Indicator 10.
All right. Ao, take it away.
All right, the graduation rate. So that's our district goal. The graduation rate of 100% by 2022. Gosh, that's next year. That's in like a month and a half. So that's a little worrisome. So again, given the fact that we just had gone through 18 months of a pandemic, when I pulled these numbers, I was pleasantly surprised. I'm just going to say that. Last year, and if you think about this, ODE is always a year behind when they do their reporting, report card reporting. And so we've got some numbers from last year. So the class of 2021, we had a little bit more than we did the year before. I think we might have been up a percentage point or two, which is awesome considering we had just gone through a pandemic, or we're in the middle of a pandemic. So 26 out of 32 students. I want to kind of give you an idea of what it's like when we think of these numbers, because when I talked about this to my staff, they weren't clear on this. So you take a look at the number of students that were enrolled their freshman year. So let's say the class of 2021, there was 44 students that were enrolled their freshman year. And that by the time they got to their senior year, we only had 32 of them. So that means that students had gone somewhere else. And so what we look at is those, when we get requests for CUME files from other schools, that ticks that off. So now that student becomes that student or that school's student. So every year we always have what we consider dropouts, and those are students that had never enrolled in another school. So that impacts us. When my staff went, oh, now I understand. Because when we just look at pure numbers, like beginning of this year, let's say September to the end of, or to the middle of June when they got, you can take a look at it and go, okay, that's pretty good numbers. But you got to go back to when they were freshmen to see those students who were actually enrolled with us that freshman year. Did they go somewhere else or did they just drop out? So with that being said, the goal was 85%. We were at 81%. That is not okay. Any of these numbers on here, I'm just going to tell you, I'm not okay with. When we think about this, there are 21% of our students not graduating and not prepared for life. And that's a big deal to me. That's a huge deal. So if we go to class of 2022, which is this year's seniors, the students are on track to graduate. That actually might have bumped up a little bit because a couple of kids finished the GA or Graduation Alliance course this last week, but I kept it at that. Our class of 2023, they also were 79%, and then our class of 2024 is also 79%. We don't have any information on our freshmen yet because we don't have official grades yet. So I just want to be super clear with the board that I'm not happy with those. My staff are not happy with those numbers. And if we can go to the next slide, we'll talk about some of the things that we're doing to make sure that we can make sure that we're capturing all these students that are struggling. So we're identifying students right now, actually have been early on, and at the first progress report, and creating a plan not only with the student, but also with the parent to provide the necessary levels of support. That support could be social emotional. It could be some mental health things that we're dealing with right now with some students, as well as academic. So those are things that we actually build the plan around. We also monitor student progress to ensure these supports are working. So if they're not working, then we got to go a different angle. Provide students that fail the course an avenue to recover the credit. So that, again, we talked about this just a little bit ago. It could have been summer school. They can retake the course they failed again, which some do, but many are right now enrolling in Graduation Alliance. So that's been a successful thing for us for our Tier 1 kids, which are those kids who are just looking to recover a class here or a class there. And then lastly, our staff analyze student data during PLC time to determine the best ways to support struggling students. They're taking ownership of student progress. This is one of our student learning growth goals this year that ODE requires us to do, to create 2 of them. That's one of the goals for all staff, is they're taking a look at their advisory students. They're having conversations with their advisory students once they've taken a look at their transcripts and making a plan with them as well. So there's really good things happening, but what I'm most excited about, which is not on here, is our movement towards a response to intervention or multi-tiered systems of support program that we're moving to next year, and what that will mean for our kids at the high school. I'm just going to say this, I'm going to go out on a limb because I could see within 3 years, once we start an ITI or RTI/MTSS program, we're going to see at least a 10% bump, if not more, in graduation rates with our kids. It's going to be exciting, and I'm super excited about that. So those are the things that we're doing right now, and then the RTI/MTSS process will be coming very soon.
Remind me what RTI stands for.
Response to intervention.
Thank you. And MTS is multi-tiered.
Yeah, they're essentially the same thing. It just depends on which company you're working with.
Okay. Questions for Dale?
And for the dummy, TLC means?
Special learning communities.
Thank you.
Those are what we meet every Wednesday morning.
Oh, yeah.
For early or late start Wednesdays. We meet in our PLC groups.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good question though.
So those are our slides that we prepared for you. Any other questions that you all have? Dale will get that follow-up slide to you. I apologize.
Yes.
Sometimes Google isn't our friend. Most of the times it is, but not always.
I appreciated the level and the information shared. I thought it was very understandable, digestible, on target with what our intentions are with the strategic plan that we currently have. So I just wanted to thank you all. Really well done. Any other questions?
I'm sure Teresa wants to hang in kindergarten. I heard she loved first grade.
It was first grade, but either way.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you all very much for your support.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to our budget report.
So first, I'm gonna do, go through a report or some slides on ADM and the state school fund, and then we'll go into the normal reports that you guys normally see, the financial reports, but these obviously connect. So I wanted you to see both. So I apologize if you guys already know a lot of this part about ADM. Also, we had some changes that happened last week. So you'll see some old data and then new data, and then I put them side by side because if you're like me, I like to compare before and after. So this first slide here is basically breaking down how we get our state school fund, which is our major source of revenue. This is how we basically budgeted for this year. And so as of when we did the budget, we were going to get about a little less than $9,000 per student. And if we go to the next page, they rebalanced the state school fund last week. So basically what happened is over 13,000 students have left the public education system in Oregon. As a result of that, because there's such a huge shift, they rebalanced the state school fund to, so now instead of it being $8,900 per student, it has gone up to a little over $9,000 per student. And so that doesn't happen. It's very rare that it gets rebalanced at that level. They also said that they were very conservative though when they changed the per student number, because their data is telling them that the majority of these students went into homeschooling. And so the thought process behind that, ODE is concerned that, okay, these kids are going to start wanting to come back in the spring. They're going to want to come do activities and they're going to not be at home anymore. And so they were very conservative when they did the rebalancing because of that. That's not really what our data shows for our district. But as a whole, they said there's a correlation between the ESD's increase in homeschooling is pretty comparable to what the overall state is at. So this next slide, and I'm sorry, I will make it a little smaller so it fits the screen. The next slide kind of does a comparison side by side. So the top part is the same, and the bottom part is where it breaks it down. Now there's two things that happened for us during this rebalancing. One, our ADM changed, and I'll go into that on the next slide. And then the total revenue per ADM changed. So our ADM went down, and then our per ADM went up a little bit, not enough obviously to offset it, but it was a significant amount of money, thankfully, for us. So next screen, this kind of shows you how ADM is calculated. So we look at what, and this is what we budgeted based on, was these numbers here. We based our number of students at 685 students. 2020-21, we estimated it, or they edited us at 640 students. We assumed that we were going to get about half of what we lost back. And so that's how we budgeted. And then we get extra weights, as you can see. So if we have students in an English learners program, we get extra weights for that. We also get extra weights for students in poverty, and we also get a little bit of extra weights for being a small high school. So at the very bottom, you can see those two numbers. We had what our estimated ADMW, which is 900.51. And then we had the 2020-21 ADMW. When we figure out what we get for state school fund, we always get the higher of the two numbers. So when we, again, did the budgeting, we based it on the 900.51 because we thought we actually were going to get more students than that 685. So we thought that that was a conservative number, you know, to budget on. Again, that estimated that we were going to get about 50 students back from what we lost. So if you go in the next slide, this, so each year around this time, if there's been a significant change in ADM, we can go in and update our numbers to closer to actual, so that way there's not like this big surprise in the spring when the state school fund is actually reconciled. And so because of this across the board at the state level, there was, I think, 70 districts that went in and did a rebalance of this, which is why we ended up getting more money per student. However, you can see that our extended ADMW for 2021-22, based on what our actuals are right now, is 835.08. So when you look at that, and then you look at what our 2020 and 21 was, the higher of the two is actually right now, which is 835.08. So that is, you know, a reduction of, what was that, 65 less that we had. Thankfully, we get to use the higher of the two. So it's 851.3. So that's basically what our state school fund is now being calculated on. So it was being calculated on 900.51. Now it's being calculated on 851.3, which is the higher of the two. But you can see next year, moving forward, we don't get some of these students back, that the higher of the two potentially could be that 835.08. So every month I do this report, basically that allows us to see like where we are at in terms of what we budgeted for and what our current estimate is based on what our enrollment is. And I also put on the left-hand side just kind of a history, so you could kind of see, you know, what's been happening. And I know you guys have been watching enrollment really closely, but I put enrollment, the state school fund history, so what we've gotten each year, and then the ADMW history, so what we actually get paid on. And so right now, based on that rebalance, so with the higher per student but lower ADMW, we're looking at a deficit of about $350,000. So the next slide is just kind of letting you guys some things to think about. So when they did the rebalance, it did lessen our deficit by about $160,000. So that was a really good thing for us. But we still obviously have some things we need to do. You know, we're working on making sure that expenses are strategic and thoughtful, making them based on need. But some things to consider, you know, the cost of a day for certified staff is $34,000. Approximate cost of a day for classified including district office is about $13,000. This doesn't include admins. The average annual cost, this is for a full year, you know, we're actually in November, it's about $105,000. We also could look at reevaluating our ESSER 3 spending. We have a, you know, a budget set for that, but you know, that is something too that we could reevaluate. So that's kind of giving you guys a picture of what's going on right now. You know, honestly, unless we get students back, it would have to be a, you know, a big number of students before we would move back up to that 900 ADMW. So the next, to correlate this, the financial summary, you can see.
Can I ask you a question on the ADMW?
Yes.
For you? So are there certain dates throughout the year that you capture it, and then whatever the highest number is what we
So,
when we report? I get, that's the
Yeah.
one thing that always confuses me.
Yeah, this is-
Timing of counting.
yeah, so we do, I think it's in so it's the prior year in the spring, so I think it was before. I know that I wasn't part of that piece, so it actually might have been in the early part of the year that we do an estimate for the following year. So that opened up, and I think that that's due for us to do 22, 23 estimates, and that's due like by January. So that's just an estimate. And then towards May is where they open it up and they kind of say, but this is where you're at. If there's anything that you want to change, you could actually ask to be opened up again. But it's really, it's our numbers that we're reporting essentially. And then I feel, and I can get back to you guys on this for exact, in the next year, like around March, they do another look at it so they can reconcile the state school fund. And then the final reconciliation is in May. And so they take the numbers from, like we do an ADM collection every quarter. And I just did first period ADM, and then they use the second and the third period to determine our actual numbers. But I can send that to you guys so that, to make sure that's completely accurate.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's mostly us
Yeah,
reporting.
it's a kind of a moving target and that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is.
yeah, thank you. It was very clear though, I really.
Good.
Yes.
Good. I learned a lot about state school funds and ATM. I'm in this new business manager class, and the guy, Adam Crime, who does the state school fund, was actually a presenter last week at ours, so it was like perfect timing. So he was able to tell me these things a little ahead of time, so it was nice to be able to share accurate information with you guys. So looking at the financials for the general fund, you can see on the line item 3101 state school fund, we were getting about $560,000 a month. The projected for the rest of the year is about 525. So that's a pretty big gap. And you can see when you're going down into expenses. So, you know, revenues, not including the taxes, but you know, just based on state school fund and then a little bit of grant money, you know, we're looking at around 590. But our payroll benefits, you know, it's going to average between 650 to 750. This was a little bit higher because we paid out stipends, like leadership stipends and admin stipends, and we also paid out winter sports, no, fall sports, sorry. So it was a little bit higher, but you can see the gap there each month. So, any questions on this piece?
Nope.
Okay. And then lunch fund, it just plugs along. It's we didn't get any money yet. Their system is down for reclaiming the funding for the food reimbursements. But you can see our expenses there, but we still have a healthy, you know, fund balance going for us. So the lunch fund is moving along.
Thank you, Christy.
Mhm.
Good job, right? Moving on to superintendent's report. Rachel?
Inadvertently, you got last month's superintendent report, I think, in your packets. So not that I want to revisit last month with you, but I do have the correct slideshow here. We'll make sure and get those out to you. And of course, we're recording this. So superintendent's report for November 8th. I'm continuing a trend this evening in terms of talking about enrollment and where we are at with that. And I wanted to start by sharing with you what we're seeing statewide and comparing 1920 with 2021. Initial reports for fall ADM, which Christy had just talked about, that first period reporting window had not yet been closed for this fall of 2021. So I don't have that data yet, but data between 2019 and 2020 and 2020, 2021 indicate that 160 out of the 197 districts have experienced decreased enrollment. That's where those 13,000 kids, they've gone. So that just echoes that. This is 82% of our school districts. I wish that you had this in front of you. I'm sorry that it's so small, but you'll see up here that based on, again, not what we have right now, but based on those 2-year comparisons, Mount Angel School District in 1920, 728 students, now down, or last spring down to 658 with a difference there. It's a 9.6% drop, but I wanted you to see comparative districts that are near close to our size on what their drops are, and they're in a rank order then of most to least. So that just gives you perspective. It's really being felt statewide. For us, student enrollment was as high as 739 students. Current enrollment as of last week, November 4th, 633. This is a loss of 106 students. And if you look at page 2 of your board packet, we finally have those updated templates for you that show we don't have a grade 46. We have an eagle eye that noticed that tonight. No, we do not have a grade 46. Something shifted when we put that into the packet. So apologies there, and we will fix that. But this gives you a sense of where enrollment has been. And if you look off to the right, then those last 3 columns where it was. And then at the bottom, you'll see that the numbers are adjusted just a bit because Stride K-12 adds a sprinkling into the enrollment numbers. But that's where we are at.
And Stride K-12 means?
Stride K-12 is our virtual program.
Thank you.
Any questions on enrollment before I move on to the next topic? It's a sobering conundrum. So the next part of my report is taking a look at data, and we have just a bit to share with you with a huge word of caution. The Oregon State report cards did in fact come out, and if you look at them, there are a lot of go to this link. And when you go to the link, this is what it says. Should not be compared across schools, districts, or time, should not be compared across student groups. So there's not a whole lot of meat there to analyze, and that's understandable. That's understandable. The one thing that we do have, if we look at the achievement data from last year, Latino students, we see that on track to graduate, 9th grade, 74% for Latinos, 81% for on-time graduation. I circled a few other things for you. White, free reduced price lunch, Ever English learners, female and male. You'll see if you look across what we have there. Some of it not news, the on track to graduate and on-time graduation were available to us last January.
It looks like on the next to the last highlight, where the something for female goes down from 90 to 81.
Well, 90% of females are on track to graduate.
Right.
And then females, 81% of females are on time graduation. So they're a bit different from each other.
And the question, the point was, that seems like a pretty substantial drop. No, yes.
That's an excellent question, and I wouldn't know how to respond to that, but I can research it.
I don't know, you need to research it.
But it's 2 different
they're
groups
2
of
different
kids.
measures,
Yeah,
John,
they-
so-
they-
One's grade 8, one's grade 12.
They're not the same group of students.
Yeah. and not-
Sorry, I misunderstood.
Thank you.
So you have 9th grade, the 9th grade cohort or 9th grade on track, and you have your 12th graders who are on track to graduate. So they're 2 different.
So Director Conklin, maybe the best way to clarify that is 90% of females are on track as ninth graders, but only 73% of males are on track as ninth
Nice.
graders.
Thank
Does that
you.
help?
Much better. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
We do have a little bit of achievement data from last spring. There were a lot of optional tests and some required tests. Many school districts did not participate in Smarter Balanced Assessment last spring. Mount Angel did. This is what we have. They're using the term this year, observed proficiency, to show how our students fared. And I hesitated to share this, and I'll tell you why tonight.
And Rachel, just to clarify, those are percentages.
Those are
Okay,
percentages,
I just
thank
wanted
you.
to make sure.
I'm glad you asked. Yes, those are percentages. My concern with comparing this to other years is when you look at standardized tests and norms and baselines, we don't know where that's going now. We don't know what the new baseline is. So is it relevant necessarily to compare this data with other years? I mean, that's not just a Mount Angel problem or a state problem, that's a world problem, right? So just something to think about. Any questions on data? No? Okay. I was asked if I could please provide an update on our vaccination mandate status. And of our 93 licensed and classified staff members, we have an 84% vaccination rate for all staff. We did not lose one employee. They have all been retained. Any questions?
Big thank you to you, Rachel, for making sure that happens. All district employees have been retained. So thank you for that.
Everybody is very valued. This is a tight family. We need everybody. And then one final thing just to share with you, and I should have put it in a slide. Next week is American Education Week for teachers. And so just always keep that in mind. I appreciate what they do and I want to love them up. I hope you will too.
American who?
Educator Week,
Thank you.
licensed teacher. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Board member reports, anybody have anything to report? Okay. Moving on, we're to the public forum part of our meeting now. So Jill, do we have anybody signed up to address us?
I have one sign up online, that's Tony Root.
Okay, so we have Tony, and while Tony is getting ready to address us, if anybody else wants to sign up, you can go ahead and do so using the chat. And so Tony and anybody else who would like to speak with us, individual comments are limited to 3 minutes. If more time is required, please submit comments or questions in writing. At this time, members of the public are invited to present concerns to the board. Speakers may offer objective criticism of school operations and programs, but the board will not hear complaints concerning individual school personnel. The chairperson will direct complaints to the appropriate means for board consideration and disposition of legitimate complaints involving individuals. That's a mouthful. So Tony, when you're ready, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and we'll start the timer.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I just have a few questions for the board or for whomever, I'm not real sure, but I'm just wondering, I have 3 kiddos in the school district. I have 1 at the middle school and I have 2 at the elementary school. And I am wondering what the possibility would be to open up the opportunity for students at the middle school to use their lockers to store their books in their backpacks. My student is an 8th grader and her backpack weighs 27 pounds. So she's lugging around 27 pounds the entire day, including an instrument. And if she chooses to take a lunch that day, her lunch too. So I'm just wondering, when is the time that we can start utilizing the lockers for these kids? These backpacks are extremely heavy. And I I don't think is necessary for them to be carried around like that. I think they can use their lockers. So I'd like to research that, figure out a way that we can make that happen for them. The other thing that I'm wondering is if there's a possibility of mixing classes at recess at the elementary school level. So for example, my son is in kindergarten and he has a friend that is in the other kindergarten class, but they can't cross zones because they're in a different class. So he is not allowed to play with his friends that are in the other class. And so I'm wondering what, if that, I'm not clear as to if that is a rule coming from the Oregon Department of Education, or if that's a district rule that they can't cross zones at recess time. But I'm wondering if that could be reevaluated here soon so that he could, and my daughter too, that's in 5th grade, could choose to play with her friends that are in another class, because it's not as if they don't see each other outside of class anyway. So I'm just wondering if we could reevaluate that rule. And then I'm wondering also, in addition to all of that, the assemblies, is there any point where we could start implementing assemblies in person at the elementary and middle school level? I'm just wondering if that's something that we could look at changing. And that's all I have. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my questions and concerns.
Thank you, Tony. And just to clarify a question, when you talk about assemblies in person, do you mean having the ability to come in and observe the assembly? Or
No, I mean, for the kids to gather in the gym. So for example, the students will be having a fun run assembly coming up here in a few days. Is there a way to make that so that the kids can gather all together in the gym at one time?
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, instead of having it virtual, I think it would be a more meaningful experience for them if they could engage in an assembly that's in person in the gym rather than online.
Thank you. So thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Is anybody else signed up, Jill? So I would ask Superintendent if you are ready to address any of the questions, and if not, we can follow up with Tony after the meeting.
I would be happy to address all of those issues, actually. Thank you for bringing them up. We actually have an administrators meeting scheduled tomorrow morning to bring up this very issue and to really talk about what does it mean to potentially normalize COVID, and where do you draw the line and start moving back into normalcy? So that's the topic for tomorrow morning.
Oh, good, timely question. Tony.
Very good timing.
Thank you so much. So what I can say is we don't have answers for you tonight. We really appreciate you addressing us, and you'll be hearing from Ms. Stuckey in response to your questions.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Sorry, you don't have to answer now, but is that something that we've received potentially an announcement going out to the community about?
Yeah, I think it's very important. I know there's a lot of buzz right now in the community about these very issues.
Exactly.
Thank you. Okay, any board comments? Thank you very much. Anybody else signed up? Okay, wonderful. Moving on to action items, OSBA board elections. So in our packets, we do have those that are running for OSBA. And in looking, so as a board, we can take a couple different actions. We can vote for each position. We can abstain from voting, or we can defer it to next meeting because the ballot isn't due until December 17th. So what I'm seeing is that there is one person for this position 11. Let's see.
There's
Board of
there's only
Directors,
one for every
there's one for each,
Yeah.
right? So if someone wants to move ahead and recommend that we just vote for all of those that have put their names forward, since there's only one per position. we could-
I'd like to make a motion that we vote for those people that have run for those positions, considering there's only one.
A second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Right. So these 4 people received our votes. Thank you. And moving on. Spring Valley Dairy Contract. And we did receive information about this, and there is a recommendation in our board packet for awarding the RFP to Spring Valley for the 2021-22 school year. Anybody have questions for superintendent about this one? If someone does want to make a motion, the language is on a blue sheet.
I move that Mount Angel School District accept and award RFP D 2020-2025 to Spring Valley for the 2021-2022 school year.
Second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I'm just abstaining from vote because there's a conflict of interest.
Thank you. So Teresa will not be engaging. Any further discussion or comments? Okay, so all in favor? Aye. Opposed? And 1 abstention. It passes. Right. Moving on to discussion items. School board student representative. So this is where we get to talk about moving this forward. So I'm thinking where we were. We need to figure out how we want to move forward. So,
Exactly.
yeah,
What is the process that you're envisioning?
guidance for the
Particulars?
those that are taking action to spread the word, timing, what we want the process to look like. What are your
I think it's something that they apply for and they run in the spring to then start kind of like you start with the school board, right? You start in July. So they would start in July of next year. So that gives us enough time to kind of get the word out. School leadership group, it'd be a position within the leadership group at the high school as well. But I think that applications and applying, and then we can set up interviews for that as well.
And I like that thought process because I really don't think we want somebody just waking up on a Thursday and saying, oh gosh, this would be a nice ad for my resume for this year. This should be a actual, I'm willing to make a little bit of an investment. I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing here, but there should be an investment and a thought that went into this.
And I know, Andy, you had come up with some really good examples of applications and even policy language.
Don't know how to do it, but I'd also recommend that if we had the leadership group or somebody might be able to come up with what is it that we'd hope that this person would take out of their participation here. And not, I mean, there's no beating with sticks or anything here. There's just, if you know what you're shooting for, he or she may be able to focus their mind. I spent my first year going, holy Toledo. And when somebody doesn't have, they're working in the school and we're taking them and we're putting them in a completely different atmosphere. I think it'd be prudent to have a way for them to know what success might look like. And even if we don't get to the leadership group saying that, I think that we as a group would want to say, take 5 or 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever, and come up with what we would hope for this person. We're obviously trying to pump a little air in his tires or her tires, but we're also trying to make sure that this isn't just wasted time or add one to your resume.
Yeah, and what my where my brain went on that is it could be intentions from the board on what we hope the student will bring to us, and in the application, ask the student what they hope to gain from the
Any
experience.
part of
So we
that,
can
Sherry,
hone
is
it, so it can
exactly
be a
where we
win-win.
need to
And I
be.
think if we develop the process that way and start it with that intention, what's the student's intention and what's our intention, and be clear about that at the front end, that's really good comment, John. So what I would say is timing wise, probably if we're gonna want the process to be mature by spring, that we probably want the policy and application materials ready early 22. So I'm not sure, Andy, would you wanna maybe take that on and, you could meet with Mr. Peterson maybe and kind of figure out some stuff to bring back to us by January or even December? First review, January?
Let's go January.
Let's go January. Does that sound like a good next step?
Great.
And what we need to adopt a policy, right? We haven't done that yet.
We have.
Oh, we have
Yeah.
a policy, that's right. I missed
Yeah.
that meeting, so you know.
But I'm thinking timeline.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, here's what the application would look like.
Yes.
And kind of our role within that, and yeah, what we hope to make it out.
Yeah, vice versa. Yeah, what's that process? What happens when? That would be great. Thank you. And if you want to tag anyone to help you with that, you sure can. And I sense that you're fully capable of running with it.
If anyone wants to help, so we're welcome to help.
Good.
Andy,
So,
January, yeah.
okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Andy. Good. And then any other comments on the? And then, so as a board, as John mentioned, let's be thinking about what it is that we're hoping the experience with the student engaging in our meetings will bring to us as a board. Strategic plan update.
We go. Well, we have a community survey going live tomorrow. And so here's your sneak peek tonight of what is on there and why it's on there. Just as everything about the strategic plan is strategic, so are the questions that are on the survey. What has already been shared with you in a work session is the framework that we're using to build our strategic plan. And the how behind applying that framework is, again, why do we exist? What is our purpose? Vision, what must our district become to accomplish our purpose? Values, how must we behave or act to achieve our vision? And that's our board work. And then goals, how will we mark our progress? So that should be familiar to all of you. Oh, yeah. The strategic plan survey, again, going live tomorrow. What are we looking for in this survey? We want to know how our community members or our stakeholders perceive. What is their current reality? Tell us how we're doing. What is the desired reality? What are your community priorities for graduates? What is value? What actions would a school district be displaying that are most important to you? We want to be looking for trends because that's going to push the priorities, any anomalies, and have qualitative and quantitative data. So a little bit more now about jumping into what's going to be qualitative. My primary relationship with the school district is we want to be able to identify who our stakeholders are. I know there will be some people that are more than one of those. So you got to choose. What's your primary relationship? What's your greatest expectation for a graduate of the Mount Angel School District? Please rank the following in order of importance, with 5 being the most important. So we're trying to glean how people are feeling about these possibilities. We want to get at those priorities. Please tell us how we are doing in the following categories: high quality education, staff quality, safety, extracurricular activities, course offerings, district facilities, school and community connection, and other. We want people to be able to offer their own thought. We don't want to box people in. Before I go any further, it's probably important for you to hear that the very first paragraph at the top of the survey is, let's work really hard to think beyond COVID. It's going to be really
We're trying to
important
get beyond COVID.
beyond COVID,
Thank
so
you.
that when we are really getting input from people, we can think about where 5 years from now, we don't want to be dealing with COVID. We want to be dealing with the dreams of our community. The Mount Angel School District's current strategic plan focuses on 5 areas. Now, I know there are more than 5 indicators, but they collapse into basically 5 areas. I just wanted to get a sense of how people felt about those and how they would be rated. So identifying the response to previous strategic plan. What makes us a successful school district right now? That's a perceived current reality. What current Mount Angel School District programs and practices can be improved that are not related to COVID-19 mandates? Again, identifying perceived areas for improvement or perceived current reality. What new programs, practices, or priorities that are unrelated to COVID should be added to meet unmet needs? What are our stakeholder interests? I do want to rework this one a little bit, and I'm going to do that tomorrow morning before it goes live. What actions and beliefs are most important for school districts to demonstrate, or our school district to demonstrate? The reason I want to rework it just a little bit is I want to make sure there's no misinterpretation of values that folks might have at home as part of their family values. We're talking about a different definition of values. I want to make sure that's very clear in the survey. So I'm going to give it one more look over. The next steps, preparing for our community forum, December 14th. We're going to dig even more deeply into what the perceived reality is and the desired reality. We won't be looking at the survey that night. It will be another discussion on perceived reality and desired reality. And we'll start putting this out now that we know now that we have it live and we know what the link is going to be, we'll start pushing this information out. What questions do you have about the survey?
How are we going to reach the community members that don't have a student in the school district? How are they going to be made aware about the survey?
What I'd like to do is link with the city of Mount Angel. First of all, make sure that we get connected there. But I think it's going to be really important for me and other folks to make visits. I'll be going to Mount Angel Towers and asking people to participate. We can't expect people to come to us. We have to be willing to go to them.
That's correct.
And that includes families who may have parents who speak languages other than English. We have to be willing to go to them. Great question.
Okay, so this December 14th is the day after our next school board meeting. Yes?
You gonna be there?
Just making sure everybody's aware we're doing 2 nights in a row here.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that a 6:30?
I have not put a time to it yet, but my guess would be probably 6:30 or 7.
Thanks.
Yes.
I'm glad you have our next school board meeting on your calendar.
But it's the time I have all the time. It's not the day, it's the time.
Any questions for Rachel on the survey?
Thank
Looks
you.
great. Thank you. And now the board policy, the oh so exciting world. And I want to thank John and Teresa for your efforts here. Very helpful.
Would you like me to move forward with discussing these? Is that okay? Thank you very much. So in the work that Director Conklin, Director Kincaid, and I did, we looked through quite a few policies in ARs and selected 4 policies and 2 administrative rules or ARs to put forward tonight. And the first one is policy AC on non-discrimination. This is an updated OSBA policy sample that adds gender identity to policy AC, which we already have in place. The recommendation tonight would be to apply all OSB language to our current policy and move to a second reading.
Anybody opposed to that?
So the next piece to that is the administrative rule that goes along with that. And again, gender identity is added as a type of discrimination on the form that we have. The recommendation is to apply all OSB language to the current administrative rule.
See no one speaking up and contesting that, so.
I just have a question. Is the OSBA language coming from current ORS?
This just came from the October OSBA policy update, so it's very current, if that's what you mean.
So they're following something else, or this is theirs?
We didn't verify that. We just assumed that that was how that was done.
I can verify after, that's a good question. I can verify after having a consultation with Rick Stuckey this afternoon that all policy is based on current law. Yeah, they definitely check that box. Okay, next up, policy GBA, equal opportunity employer. So the updated OSBA policy sample adds gender identity to policy GBA, and the recommendation is to apply all OSBA language to current policy and move this to a second reading. All right, policy GBEA, workplace harassment. This updated OSBA policy sample adds gender identity to policy GBEA, and the recommendation is to apply all OSBA language to current policy and move to a second reading. All right, moving forward. Policy GBNAA and JHFF, suspected sexual conduct with students. This has several layers to it. The updated OSBA policy sample distinguishes between sexual conduct and practices, including verbal, written, and electronic communication that are part of an education program that meets state educational standards or board-approved policy. So it's clarifying what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And further, the sample OSBA policy clarifies that a consensual relationship that exists between students who are also school employees, contractors, agents, or volunteers, and is not prohibited by law and does not create an intimidating or hostile educational environment is also not prohibited. That's new language. So the recommendation is to apply all OSBA language to current policy and move to a second reading. I would like to just put in here that I asked Rick Stuckey for clarification this afternoon on where this might have come from. Because it's unusual. Apparently there was a district, a very large district in our state that had an issue with this. And what ended up happening was that both students who were employed as temporary part-time workers for the summer, it got into a legal issue. So maybe not so applicable here in Mount Angel, but in other larger districts it might be.
The circumstance came up at least once. Thank you, Rachel, that's helpful. Okay.
And then the administrative rule that follows this, clarification regarding designee, as well as the process the designee is required to follow for notification purposes when sexual conduct is suspected by a school employee, contractor, agent, or volunteer. And the recommendation is to apply all OSBA language to current administrative rule.
Any questions or comments for Rachel about the proposed changes to policy? Anybody have anything more to say for the good of the
room. Thank you, everyone who's been with us tonight. And with that, meeting is adjourned.